It seems like farmed fish should be more sustainable than wild-caught fish, right? With wild-caught, there is the constant risk of bycatch. That's when you net some poor dolphin or something in the process of trying to catch the fish that you're actually after. But even if your aim is 100% no bycatch, there's still the problem that there are only so many fish in the sea. There's only so many of them down there, and when they're gone, they're gone. With aquaculture, it's different. Generally, you're breeding fish that otherwise would not have existed at all. Indeed, aquaculture probably has a very big and very positive role to play in satisfying humanity's ever-growing appetite for animal protein. But just because the fish is farmed doesn't mean that it's sustainable. It depends on the fish, and it depends on the fishery. If you're overwhelmed like I am, this guy is here to help you.
I would say I eat, in terms of my protein, almost exclusively seafood. That's how I got into my career is enjoying seafood as a child. So
Tyler Isaac runs the aquaculture program at seafoodwatch.org. This is a tremendous public service provided by the Monterey Bay Aquarium in California. Pretty much any aquatic animal you might consider eating, they've got a page on it here rating its sustainability. Isaac handles ratings for farmed fish, and one of the first things he'll point out is that lots of fish is farmed in natural waters. This is a picture of a salmon farm in Norway. All you got standing between the salmon pens and the fjord or whatever is a big net. So fish poop, uneaten feed, it slips right through.
It's oftentimes managed in such a way where those farms are sited ideally in deeper sites with good water circulation, so most of those nutrients are effectively flushed.
But sometimes it's not, and there can be further problems. Pathogens the fish may be carrying, parasites, along with any drugs the farmer might be using to treat those problems. Those also can just slip right through the net pen into the ecosystem where they can cause problems. Also, fish escape, and if they're not a native species or if they're carrying diseases, they can really cause problems out there. In contrast, no fish escapes from Springcress Trout Farm in Union County, Pennsylvania. What's a rainbow trout gonna do if it gets out of the barn? Hitchhike to Lewisburg? Have a nice dinner at Elizabeth's? Ask the waiter if there's a stream in town he can stay at? Nah, that trout is gonna stay in the secure keeping of the Reed family, the 5th and 6th generations to farm in this Pennsylvania valley. Their ancestors started with dairy cows.
I think that they would be a little bit shocked and amazed to see that we have water running into the old bank barn, but...
The dad there, Dwayne, he first tried raising coho salmon in the barn when he was a much younger man.
So we had kind of the whole setup of the tanks, the fish. It unfortunately didn't work out for him, so me and my siblings kind of nudged him to get trout. They're more of a native fish, and in my opinion, I think they taste a lot better.
Cora Reed there actually owns the little family fish business. She and her brother Clayton hope to grow it into their main gig after they finish college. And from what I understand from seafoodwatch.org, they're doing pretty much everything right. The water they use comes from a pond just up the ridge.
The source of the spring, it's kind of fed through underground caverns in our limestone cropping here. And as the water flows, it comes out from underneath the ground, travels in a 4-inch tube down to the barn.
And into these raceway tanks, so called because the water races through. If you circulate your water really fast, you can keep a lot of fish healthy in a relatively small space. They've got a couple thousand rainbow trout right now. They naturally poop a lot. The fish, not the family. And where does that poop go?
So what we have here is sort of like a settling basin.
Water overflows the tank, goes into that basin under the floor, the manure settles out, and they use that to fertilize their fields. The water goes into outdoor artificial ponds where the trout live the middle phase of their lives. Eventually, this water will go into a stream fed by the spring up the ridge. In other words, where it would have flowed anyway.
So this pond was just used. We drain it out for about a year so we can get rid of bacteria, kind of let the pond dry up. And then, so we'll switch ponds and we'll use that one for next year.
Now, raising fish in tanks and ponds has its own problems, but the obvious advantage from an environmental standpoint is you can control everything. And the government can regulate what you're doing because your outflow is coming through a pipe that an inspector can get in front of and test, which is a thing that happens here in the US.
through the NPDS system, the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, and they're required to mitigate their nutrient loading or pollutant loading to the environment through measuring their nitrogen, their phosphorus, et cetera. And if it's out of compliance, then they need to remedy that. And so that's a lot easier to do with a tank or a pond when there's a pipe.
In contrast to a net pen in the ocean, where there is no pipe to check. This is a picture of a tuna pen, and I have no idea if this particular one is well run or not. What I do know is that some of the worst sustainability ratings ever bestowed by seafoodwatch.org have been on farmed tuna, specifically ranched bluefin tuna. Ranched in this context does not mean that the fish live on a ranch, moseying between the tumbleweeds as they graze. Now, ranched means that the producers are not actually breeding their own fish.
It utilizes wild captured bluefin tuna and then fattens them on the farm. And so that scores very poorly for us, especially considering the conservation status of most bluefin tuna stocks are listed as endangered or critically endangered.
Yeah, not really what you think of when you think of farmed fish. This is why I try to check seafoodwatch.org before I buy any fish, and why I try to look really closely at product labels, which is something I can do much more effectively with my glasses from the sponsor of this video, Warby Parker. Let me thank them for a sec. Don't worry, wildlife lovers, there's no actual tortoise in these tortoise shell frames I picked for my free at-home try-on. They're acetate, which is one reason why Warby Parker glasses last forever and start at just $95. That includes the prescription lenses. Warby Parker provides exceptional vision care in stores where you can also get eye exams, and of course you can get contacts or glasses online, starting with the 5 frames they will send you in a box totally free to try on. Yikes, $290s. But that's the beauty of doing this at home by myself. I'm free to be adventurous. Hey, it's almost the end of the year, and if you've got a health savings account or something similar that you've got to use or lose, spend it on some prescription sunglasses or contacts or regular glasses. Do me a favor, try 5 pairs at home for free with my link in the description, warbyparker.com/Ragusia. When you're done, you just slap on the prepaid return label and drop them in the mail. warbyparker.com/Ragusia. Thank you, Warby Parker. So anyway, ranched seafood is fish that they caught in the wild and then fattened up in captivity. That's not always as bad as it sounds. Baby fish generally have very poor survivability in the wild anyway, but yeah, it's generally better to breed your own fish. Check out the little trout hatchery they're starting up at Springcress Farm. It's in a vintage clawfoot tub because that's how you breed fish in style.
The females, they come ready to spawn in about, they start end of August in Pennsylvania, August, September, and October. The females will start to fill up with eggs. You harvest the eggs from the females. It's just a matter of pushing on their abdominal and spitting them into a bucket. Do the same thing to a male, fertilize them, and then we put them in this little incubator. And you can see in the incubator that it rolls the eggs gently, mimics a natural environment in a stream.
After a month, they get a little black eye on them. That's how you tell the difference between fertilized and unfertilized eggs, the black eye. When the larvae hatch, they will spill out into the tub. They have a little yolk sac attached to them that feeds them for about another month. After that, you gotta feed them yourself, and that raises the subject of feed. You can have the most sustainable fishery in the world, but how sustainable is the fishery where you get your fish food from? Like a lot of fish farms, the folks at Springcress have found that their fish do best on a feed made with real fish byproduct in it. Trout eat other fish in the wild. The Reed family get their feed from a guy they know and trust, but some of the feed used in aquaculture is not what you'd call sustainably sourced. In some cases, it's bycatch from the worst kind of trawling that just scoops up everything in the ocean. But that is all changing.
I would say the majority of most manufactured diets that are being fed to aquaculture species, whether it's salmon, trout, tilapia, even shrimp, is plants.
Or plants supplemented with fungus or maybe insect protein. This is a very recent paper where scientists were able to raise rainbow trout on plant feed boosted with yeast and bug protein. Without the right protein, the fish don't grow well and they get diseases. But yeah, the industry is looking for ways of feeding fish something other than other fish.
It's partly due to economics, partly due to sustainability pressures, but a shift from using wild fish ingredients like fish meal and fish oil to using plant-based ingredients, something like a soybean meal or soybean protein concentrate.
Here's some soy growing in that same valley as the trout farm in Pennsylvania. Apart from considering what the farmer feeds the fish, you also have to consider what the fish do with the food.
There's a unit called a feed conversion ratio, how much feed is required to turn into a unit of biomass or fish. With branched bluefin tuna, they're not using manufactured feeds in almost every case. They're using whole bait fish that have either been frozen or fresh. And feed conversion ratio of at least 10, 12, sometimes even 25 to 1.
That means you have to give the tuna 25 kilos of food to produce 1 kilo of tuna, a 25 to 1 conversion ratio. You're not just consuming the fish, you're consuming all the fish consumed. In contrast, beef cattle generally have a 6 to 1 feed conversion ratio here in the US. With chicken, it's down to almost a 1 to 1 ratio, and rainbow trout is down around there too. How do you know which species have good feed conversion? Well, you check seafoodwatch.org, but it also helps to think low on the food chain. Instead of eating top predators like bluefin, eat lowly filter feeders like mussels. Check out how they farm mussels. They'll do it on these long chains right off the coast. Nothing touches the bottom and messes it up.
Broadly, yes, shellfish and seaweed farms are great for the environment. They can be even regenerative and help restore that ecosystem.
This is a time-lapse uploaded by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. The Chesapeake is this sadly abused estuary on the east coast of the United States, near Washington. But anyway, this video shows oysters cleaning the bay. We humans dump an excess of nutrients into coastal waters, mostly farm runoff. These nutrients feed an overpopulation of microorganisms that cause all kinds of environmental problems. Bivalves, like oysters, they eat these excess phytoplankton and algae right out of the water. And then in some cases, we can eat them. It's a win-win. But just because a fish is farmed and it's low on the food chain, that still doesn't necessarily mean that it's sustainable. An unfortunate example would be shrimp from a few areas of concern around the world, one being parts of Southeast Asia.
It's an industry that's dominated by smallholder farmers that don't have a lot of access to capital. They're under particular pressure to produce shrimp and make money. And so that can result in things like higher stocking densities than you might normally advise, which can result in things like elevated nutrients being discharged. When you have those elevated stocking densities, it's a lot easier for disease to proliferate, and you might see treatments with something like an antibiotic to treat a bacterial disease in a shrimp pond, because otherwise that shrimp farmer is not going to have a crop to sell and doesn't have any money, right?
And then there's the human rights abuses, well-documented cases of slave labor in the Southeast Asian shrimp industry. Do you feel like you can keep up with such things? Neither do I, which is why I love the folks at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and I try to check seafoodwatch.org before I buy any aquatic animal to eat. They consider all kinds of things we didn't even have time to talk about here, like, is the farmer killing huge flocks of birds to keep them from eating the fish? That's a decoy at Springcress Farm. Also, note the steep sides of the ponds.
Yeah, we keep them so steep so no birds or predators can't get in and just like eat the fish.
But you can eat them if you live around Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. They really do supply fish to Elizabeth's. Ooh, trout with caponata. That's a Sicilian ratatouille. You can also just show up to the barn and get fish. That's what my dad does. Hey, Dad. They'll fillet some for you if you want. The trimmings go to the cats. That's a well-fed cat right there. Dad just does them under what Brits call a grill, a little butter and lemon, very nice. Trout is basically freshwater salmon. And before someone comments that salmon are freshwater salmon, just know that A, I don't like you, and B, most salmon live the middle part of their lives in the ocean, so they taste way fishier than trout. Anyway, to make something very clear, Warby Parker is the sponsor of this video. The aquarium did not give me money to push their website. They're a nonprofit and they're doing work that I want to support. Same deal with the trout farm. Though they are not a nonprofit, and I can only hope the market will reward young people who want to raise fish the right way. Cora is studying business at Penn State. Clayton is getting into hydrology.
Right now we're possibly doing, 20 fish a week?
Yeah.
If we could get up to maybe 200 to 500 fish a week, that'd be a pretty solid income for both of us, I'd say.
Yeah.
Make it happen, Captain. I'll take the first 200. I got a big freezer.